welcome to the show. I have Jason Coombs. I'm very excited for this episode. For many reasons. You are an advocate and you help a lot with mental health and substance abuse. So I want to go over some of the things that you've accomplished and battled and gone through. And so, for starters, you are a survivor of being homeless, being on the streets. You've battled overdosing and suicide attempts. You've overcome addiction. For starters, you've now battled yourself out of the trenches, and you are a best-selling author of a book called Unhooked, and it is titled How to Help an Addicted Loved One Recover. So that's a pretty awesome thing coming from a homeless addict, I say. I don't know if that's the right term for it. And then now you're a bestseller. And amongst other things, you are the owner, operator of a recovery center called the Brick House. And now you have several locations all over Idaho. Have you expanded out of Idaho yet?
No.
Okay, and so I'm really, really excited for this episode because I feel now more than ever, and I would love for you to jump on board and correct me if I'm wrong, especially I'm a girl dad, so I have a teenage daughter, and I'm very embedded into that world of young kids and social, and I do social for a living, and I see a lot of where the mental health state is of our next generation. And I work with a lot of veterans, and I see substance abuse constantly in their mental health. And I would love to jump right into this. I want to kind of get your backstory, and I want to go over, because you were talking about you've gotten raided by the DEA and overdosing. I want to hear it all. So I guess let's just start. Where are you from?
Well, goodness sakes. Let's just start with the raid. So there I was. No.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we'll get there. I super grateful to be honored to share a little bit on this. Knowing friends that are walking through exactly what you're describing in this audience is navigating those ups and downs on the mental and the substance use side of things. I grew up in Salt Lake. I was born in California, Northern California, and but for the most part, grew up in the mountains of Salt Lake.
Whereabouts?
And right outside of Salt Lake in Bountiful.
Okay.
And love the outdoor rec there. And the father is a retired pediatrician. Mother was a stay-at-home, very active in our lives, very good upbringing overall. Mm-hmm. No indications or signs from the external that would lead someone down the path of addiction or trauma and that sort of thing, at least from the family side of things. My dad is a retired colonel in the National Guard, and he was a good father, always present, but he also served our country, and I thank you for your service.
Well, thank you.
And all those within the sound of my voice, I have a huge respect. My siblings, I think this is an interesting piece of my upbringing too, is I always have struggled with comparison. And so I have a older brother who, straight A student, did very well in anything he put his mind to, and is a successful doctor today. My little brother, very successful businessman and straight A student, the whole bit, very athletic, better. Both of them are better than me at golf, and that's frustrating. Better than me at everything. I really, at least from my perspective. And then I have my sister, and it's the four of us. My sister stands out as a beacon of just beauty and has always had. I guess you could say I was known as Melissa Coombs' little brother, because I went to high school. I was the sophomore. She was the senior. She was popular. She was cute, and I always struggled with my own identity. Okay. That was the thing. And so who am I? I know I can't reach what they are achieving, because it was just not in me. I always felt off. I felt like the black sheep. I felt like
the middle child syndrome.
And then I started to discover some of the symptoms that I can see now, how they played into my life couldn't see them then. And those symptoms, I think, is where we kind of want to go with this podcast. Is there are a lot of stories related to this, but I think as far as the foundation goes, when you and I grew up, there wasn't such a thing as checking out your mental health and even talking about anxiety. So I am diagnosed with ADHD. I put emphasis on the H, and I'll tell you why. I have been diagnosed with anxiety disorder, depression, general depression, and then APD. And APD is, just remember, I had this before it becomes cool, okay? APD is auditory processing disorder.
Okay.
But it's a mental disorder. It's not a hearing disorder. And so all of these things start to come into play. When I think back, auditory processing disorder is when I am in a restaurant, I'm talking to you or my wife or someone, I can't understand the words being said because the noise that's competing with her voice garbles.
Drowns it out.
Yeah. And it garbles it like a broken up cell phone signal. And so, and that centers in the brain. And so when I think back to my childhood, like in class, for example, the day in the life of me as a kid, I would wake up feeling like I was late for the bus. My anxiety, whether I was late or not, my anxiety was always through the roof. And this was pre-social, pre-cell phones, and dates me. But the anxiety is real. And so I, would start each day that way. I definitely had no nutrition flowing into my body in the mornings. I
don't think any of us did at that generation. I think it's even worse now, but I mean, Pop-Tarts and
totally
toaster strudels and
or nothing.
or nothing.
And no water. Like, how important is a glass of water when you wake up? The first glass of water goes straight to the brain because your brain has to have hydration.
Hydrated, yep.
Has to. And then the second glass goes to your body, which is needing it to get kick-started. And my whole life, I didn't start the day off with a glass or two. I recommend 2 glasses of water. Super simple thing, just to hydrate. Changes the mindset, changes the mental wellness. And so I'm running late for the bus, whether I was late or not is not the point, but feeling that way.
Yes.
Showing up at school, and now I'm comparing, always feeling less than. And so how do we compensate for feeling less than? Well, we pop off in class, or I'm going to do something that's going to get my adrenaline going. Something's going to release my dopamine, whatever that might be. It might be a cute girl. It might be taking risk. It might be getting in a fight. It might be getting in trouble, whatever. And those are ways that I started to learn how to self-medicate that anxiety. And early on, like, this crust came over me, which I would identify as the ego, the thickness of, like, I am not going to show anyone how I really feel.
Okay. So you were hiding that by being the class clown or just being...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that would not just hide it, but it's interesting when you get that dopamine release.
For sure.
It brings that cortisol down. And the cortisol is what is out of control every morning with anxiety disorder. And so anything that would release dopamine. And so when I, just kind of fast forwarding to why people self-medicate, why people engage in risky behaviors, which is a big part of my story.
Yeah.
It was really like, not necessarily to cover up for inadequacy, although that was absolutely a piece of it. It was this need for a hit, the dopamine hit, because I was just so uncomfortable all the time. And I thought I was just...
You didn't know. I mean, they don't have the knowledge. I mean, they probably did, but now it's, with social, everything's put at the tips of your finger. But
yeah,
I mean, nobody was diagnosing kids back then. I mean,
no way.
Yeah. I remember as a kid, I don't remember anybody that, maybe one kid had ADHD, and you'd be like, what's ADHD?
Right.
I don't know how old you are. I turned 40 this year. And now, every parent's like, oh, they got ADHD. It's like, So I think it went from nothing to now the extreme, but now every kid that just, can't sit still in class, but like to legitimately have something where you're battling it every day in class and hard to pay attention. I mean, it's just...
Yes. And not sitting up in the front, not adjusting my environment for it. And so I'm in the back. So I got my auditory processing issue. I've got my anxiety issue and then I've got the ADHD. And so I did struggle in school from that standpoint. I emphasize the age because I think it's really important to share that, when you introduce this show, this interview, anytime the term mental health or addiction or anything pops up, there might be a segment of people where that's a felt need and they're like, ooh, I want to listen to that. Mm-hmm. But if it's not a felt need yet, then it's one of those topics that's like, ooh, I don't know if I want to really get into that. Yep. Like, let's just, I'm going to skip to the next episode. However, there is a really cool side to this. And I think that this is the cool side, is that on the other side of these diagnoses, so to speak, is the superpower. So
once you learn how to use it, kind of, is that what you're referring to?
Right.
Okay.
So ADHD, the hyper focus, the hyperactivity is the reason why I have a company.
So you've learned how to channel it.
You learn that it's your superpower. You learn that you need guardrails around the liabilities, like time blindness is a symptom of ADHD. And so I will sometimes be in a conversation with someone in need or just engaged, and I'm so hyper-focused. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that I forgot to pick up my kids
2 hours later
at the flagpole in there in kindergarten. Like, big deal. You don't do that as a dad. Like, that's, but didn't even
not processing.
Catch it. Yeah, I didn't catch it. And that's, I think, the symptoms. So I put a lot of alarms in my phone to remind me to think about, why is that alarm going off? And then I remember, I got to get to that thing, or I got to go. And that is how I put the guardrails around the liabilities. But then when I am able to channel and focus, I can excel at that because it's just that superpower.
So you figured out that you need blinders and that it just keeps you on track. So as a kid, before figuring this out, and you're talking about how, I don't want to say you're chasing the high of the adrenaline and the dopamines of, I was a class clown.
You and I might be a lot alike.
You're explaining all, so you're explaining everything. I'm like, holy shit. Like, this all makes sense. Being the class clown and having to have the attention and all that to cope or what, once that kind of faded off, what was the transition, or did that just stay on that path through high school? I mean, when, because I feel for guys probably like you and I and a lot of others listening, men and women, you hit that path in the road, you hit that why. How old were you when it was like, okay, me being this type of person, it's not enough anymore? When did you start chasing anything else, a substance? When did that start coming into play? Like, how old were you with that?
Yeah, that was introduced into my system, I'll say, in high school. There was there are a couple of stories that I share in the book that really detail out kind of those stages of like the first drink that I had.
So that's what you started with, was alcohol.
That was the first drink. Yep. And my friends had already had their drinks and tried it, and I felt not only like I was left out, but I had this curiosity. It was like, what is this all about? And so I was over at my buddy Sam's house, and Fonz was there. So two of my friends and his grandma's whiskey came out. And long story short, I took my first shot. Turns out I had 7, don't remember.
How old were you?
16.
Oh, that's a lot. Yeah.
Woke up the next day after a blackout, and I had a magic marker written all over my
Good for them.
body. Right?
Good for them. I hope that's still a thing.
I'm gonna get them still. Like,
I have a couple buddies. I'm on their hit list. Every time we go out, I'm always watching.
maybe I could hire you, and you could go get mine.
I was a master. I got the spots that you couldn't see, so you'd wash your face, but I'd do the whole inside of your ear, the back of your neck.
Yeah, I was a victim of that. So that was my first experience. And
did you know immediately then? Like, did you like alcohol then, or were you like, oh no, this was not for me? 'Cause I feel like you went right to the extreme with it.
It's interesting because when I woke up feeling so sick at the toilet, I was definitely like, this is the worst. But as I was walking upstairs after I kind of pulled myself together, I heard them telling stories about what I did the night before, and apparently I was pretty fun.
So it justified.
Apparently I was kind of the guy that I always wanted to be perceived as the one to have at the party. Like, bring him, because
That's all it took.
wild. That's all it took, and I couldn't wait for the next one.
Really?
And that was the beginning of a love affair with substances, because the introduction to other dry goods and pills and things along those lines, of smoking things. It's been said that it's the same mistress in a different dress, or the same noose, different rope. When it comes to substances, no matter what it is it's this not just escape, but it's a self-medication.
For sure.
And the problem with self-medicating is that I was willing to try whatever, and it would enhance my experience. And so there's that first stage of like, this is working for me. This not only is helping my anxiety, this is helping me feel great. I don't feel depressed. I'm excited to like look forward to the weekend. It just kind of like gave me this new outlook on everything. And I think that and I'm not here promoting this stage, but I think it's important to identify it, especially when there's early interventions with parents.
Absolutely.
And early interventions with their teens, because the interventions need to have that in mind, which is the individual that is self-medicating or dabbling has the mindset that this is the solution for a lot of how I feel, and what you're saying about it doesn't match up. Because what I was hearing was, don't do drugs, you will be homeless, or you will go to jail, or whatever. And I'm over here having a very different experience, and I'm like, I think everybody should do this. I think my parents should do this. I think everybody should do this. Like, everybody should do this.
So having a stay-at-home mom, and then obviously your dad, very successful. He's probably, I mean, you said he's around, but he's working all day. I mean, he's a doctor, correct? He was in National Guard or reservist. Your mom didn't pick up on any of these signs, or were you just really good at hiding them? I mean, how did, because I feel like, oh man, my mom she was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked full-time, and she was on it. Like, we couldn't get nothing by her. So is that
tricky? Yeah, I had the same experience.
So she was,
But you find ways.
Oh, for sure.
You find little ways, like
sleepover, staying at
sleepover. Yeah. Which back then, I guess sleepovers were less of a risk than they are today. Like, I'm definitely not letting my kids have sleepovers.
Everybody can come to our house.
Yeah,
that's our rule.
Yeah, exactly.
Until you can defend yourself, they can come here.
That's right.
So you're doing everything you can. So now you've moved from alcohol to pills, weed. I mean, are you doing hard drugs? I mean, are you? You said you're trying anything. So
yeah, in high school, I tried all that.
How old are you? I'm sorry, I don't mean to date you.
16. Oh, right now?
Yeah,
46. Yeah.
So I mean, that was the ecstasy days back in. Or was that pre you? Because I mean, when I was in high school, ecstasy was kind of really hitting hard, like the little mini raves and all that.
That came later.
Okay.
But what was big was LSD, mushrooms, everything you already said. And I went to a Grateful Dead show with my buddies, and that's where I was introduced to a lot of nitrous oxide balloons, and then the opium. And smoking opium. And so that's really kind of the hardest I got to at that stage. And then my buddy and I traveled overseas and went to Europe for our senior trip after graduation. And
So you're smoking opium in high school?
tried it.
Tried it.
I wasn't,
Not your thing?
I wasn't hooked yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, those guardrails of living at home kind of keep you protected. I mean, you can't do that all day and get away with it. So you find your pockets to
Take it when you can.
dabble. Yeah. And you find the ones that won't show up and smell. So, my buddy stole his grandma's lower tabs and those kinds of things.
Got it.
That are a little bit more school friendly. But I think where things started to get intense was when we went to Europe, and my buddy and I went to Europe, and it seemed like everything was 10x over there as far as the use, the potency of the alcohol, the access, and then we went to Amsterdam, which
Free reign of anything.
dude, yeah, that's a whole podcast in and of itself. But
Let's touch a little on that.
that was
So you're
nuts.
you're a high school senior in Amsterdam, unaccompanied. Are you guys just there on your own?
Yep.
Holy shit. Okay.
Yeah, a couple of 17-year-olds out there
Really?
just
So that's got to be a huge. I mean, going from Utah to Amsterdam, those are completely two different worlds.
yeah, and it was
As a kid.
really like one of those curiosity experiments where you kind of felt like you were untouchable at that age and you could do anything and get away with anything. And then there was a couple of incidences that I saw happen, like to other people, where it just got dark.
Okay.
And I'll spare some details just for purposes of maybe making it. Well, you can read between the lines. It's just, when you see the dark side of music, and you see some of the animalistic characteristics that come out in people, and the abuse, and there's nothing you can do, or else you're going to get hurt too, and there's no one to bring in to help. It just becomes a very powerless feeling, and I didn't like that. Like, I grew up in light, I grew up with love, I grew up with support. I was taught, good things.
So you saw a little behind the scenes.
Yeah, this was the polar opposite.
What everybody told you what drugs would lead to.
Yeah,
And that still wasn't enough to kind of deter you from.
it did deter me. So that was I think my first pivot is I was like, I don't want this. And so I came home from Europe. My buddy stayed. We both got offered jobs, and he took it. I came home.
Wasn't for you.
And I changed my life for a season. Really tried to discover who I am, and focused on spirituality for a couple of years. Went to Brazil after I cleaned up, and did a service mission down there for my church. Had incredible experiences seeing the world that way, and very happy. However, I didn't know how to treat this undertow of ADHD, anxiety.
Yeah, still battling it. And you didn't know though.
Yeah, this desire to escape. And it was interesting because, like, right when I got back, it was back on.
Really? What was the what switch flipped for you? Like, what was the
Just went camping with buddies, and they had alcohol.
that easy, huh?
That easy. It was just like,
Okay.
yeah, I could do that. And then before you know it,
Right back into it. Did you go hard right away, or did you work into it?
I worked into it. Yeah, I think that at that stage it was still working for me. It was when I say working for me, it felt like it was helping me each day. And so throughout college, I went to the University of Utah and got my college degree there, and dabbled and smoked weed and drank throughout the entire college days. Ended up getting married. Found a wonderful person who, we ended up ultimately getting a divorce. So fast forward to that. But yeah, squandered that marriage. Had a house, ended up getting a job after graduation at the TV station. So I was an advertising executive for the NBC affiliate, Salt Lake, KSL TV. And that's where things changed. So it gets real intense from that moment of being introduced to a coworker.
Okay.
I had a car accident, not my fault. It was rear-ended. Coworker comes up to me after a couple of days, and he says, "Hey, I want to go to lunch." Sure.
Did you know this coworker well, or was this
It was kind of new.
Okay.
It was kind of new, but he was one of those very outgoing, and he was easy to like. He was very one of those kind of guys, slick.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to lunch with him, and we had a couple of beers, and on the way back, in his car, he started to talk to me about my accident and asked me about my pain, and then when we pulled into the parking stall, he said, "Hey, I see this doctor, and he's phenomenal at pain management, and how he does hydrotherapy and massage therapy, and not only that, but he prescribes the good stuff." And he pulls out this large, massive bottle of OxyContin, which at the time was the strongest opiate you could get. Nowadays, fentanyl trumps that all day. Yeah. But at the time, that was, and the label had his name on it, and he asked me if I wanted a couple just to get me by. And I had a relationship with opiates and pain pills from when I injured my knee in soccer in high school, and took some Percocet throughout, maybe 30 days worth as prescribed. But I would stick them in my cheek and then pull them out and put them in the couch until I had 10 of them. So my mom didn't know that I was cheating on meds. Yeah, she just brought me two at a time, just I'd put them in my mouth, act like I took them, and then I'd take them out, put them in the couch, build up till 10. Nobody taught me this. This was just this kind of innate.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's just how I thought. I was like, if one feels good, 10 is going to be the best.
That's so scary.
Yeah, that was just how I rolled,
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting. So the interesting piece about this intersection with the coworker is that when he handed me a couple of pills, he proceeded to take a dollar bill, and he put a pill in the fold, and he grabbed 2 quarters, and he started to crush it up. And then he pours out the powder on this little square plastic thing that is a CD case. For those of you that don't know what that is, we used to listen to music on CDs. And they had a little case, and that was, he draws up these 2 white lines and starts the first one, and he offers me the second. And I remember a moment of hesitation and a moment of like, don't do it. Like my conscience, my power speaking.
He had the devil on one shoulder.
And then he said, it will protect your stomach lining doing it this way, and it'll hit you faster. Yeah, I thought that was some good medical advice, so I decided to just dive on in, and I railed my first line and sent me off into euphoria. And that's when he asked, would you like me to introduce you to my doctor?
Perfect timing, huh?
Yes, I do. Now, that doctor, turns out, was running Utah's largest OxyContin drug ring.
No.
When his office got raided, it was absolutely nuts, because I was, 5 months I had been going to this doctor, and each and every time I would go, like the very first time I showed up at his office, I walk in, the receptionist, first of all, my coworker set the appointment, and that's important to note, which is, that should have been my first sign. Like,
how old are you at this age?
24, 25,
Okay.
so somewhere in there. And then the receptionist asks me for the insurance, and then she gives me the paperwork, and then she gives me instructions. She says, follow these instructions exactly. So I take it back to my seat, and I'm filling it out, and the instructions are asking me to write symptoms that I don't have. Again, like I hear this conscious contact from my higher power that's saying, get out.
Mm-hmm. But didn't listen.
But I got this injury. I just got in a car accident.
Just a couple pills.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What does he look like? Let's just see where this goes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they call my name. So I go back and I walk out of there with a script for 120 pills. And as I'm walking out, he says, oh, hey, by the way, these are the instructions of where to pick them up, the pharmacy, the pharmacist, and what to say. Gives me the instructions. And then he says, and when you're ready for a refill, contact your coworker and he'll set it up.
All the red flags.
Seems like pretty normal medical practice.
Yeah, normal transaction.
Yeah. Wild.
And that's what started the major spiral. Was that?
Yep.
It's because you're just getting fed pills at this point.
That was it.
And an insurance is covering this?
So that's the thing. Yeah, insurance was paying for it.
Our medical system is wild.
These were back in the days where doctors didn't have the same system.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could doctor shop and get away with it for a while. But fast forward to 5 months later, I'm out mowing my lawn. This time I've lost like 30 pounds. I'm scrawny. I'm strung out. Like,
And you're married at this point still?
Mm-hmm. Married.
Kids?
Also working. No kids.
Okay.
And this unmarked vehicle rolls up to my curbside. And guy gets out. He's got a badge, a gun, and he's holding a manila envelope. And he walks right up to me. It's Officer Tiernan, and he gives me the manila envelope, and he says, I recommend you get an attorney. Have a nice day.
You're probably like, what?
I said, what is this? He just said it again. I recommend you get an attorney. Have a nice day. And he leaves. Open up that envelope, and I'm being charged with 4 felonies and 2 misdemeanors. Doctor shopping, insurance fraud, obtaining false prescriptions, distribution, and then a couple of misdemeanors.
All these felonies have to add up to how many years?
Decades.
Yeah, you're looking almost life.
I mean, it's nuts. If they were to, all go through at the max.
For sure, yeah.
And
worst case scenario, you're looking at a long time.
This little suburban, white kid that's never really had any trouble. I'm soft. I'm like, I mean, I didn't know I could get in trouble like that.
Are you okay? So you open this up and did you know immediately, or were you kind of confused, or you're like, did you know? Like, I mean, obviously you're months into buying pills from these guys, and have a dealer, you got your plug setting, making the calls for you. Does he still work? Are you guys still working together?
So check this out. He calls me a couple of nights before this went down.
Okay.
And so I did have a heads up, but I didn't know it was coming. Then.
Okay.
And he said, dude, turn on the news. This is my coworker. He says, dude, turn on the news. It's the 10 p.m. news. So I flip it on. It's the very channel we work at. And the news story comes on, and there's the doctor's face and the other guy that was helping run it. And he said that he was indicted on 83 felony counts, or he was being charged. He ended up getting indicted. 83 felony counts and more arrests to come. And I'm like, he said, dude, whatever you do, just don't say a word. Say a word, they're after me.
You're working at the news station that's reporting the drug dealer, insurance fraud ring, everything that you're involved in on the side. And now your news station that you work for is headlining this story.
Little did they know
that their employees, 2 of them, are just
Yeah.
buried in this whole entire thing.
Yeah. And he recruited a bunch of people to this thing.
So it's not just the two of you.
No, I mean,
From the news station, was there more?
I think it was just us two from the news station. But it's interesting because there's a full like org chart, and it looks like a multi-level marketing company, and you can see names.
Has those tears, and you're in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm there, and my coworker, and everything.
Oh my god!
I know it was wild. So when the charges went down, here's the interesting thing about addiction. I think it's important to highlight at this point, is that you would think with that much pressure, you would stop using. You would think that that would be enough to pump the brakes and say, okay, I'm done. I'm done with this.
Mm-hmm.
The end. Like, I'm going to pivot.
Not enough. That still wasn't it.
I couldn't stop.
That's
no
very
matter what.
That's very interesting you say that, because you see, and I want to get to what your why was that one, along this story. Everybody I've dealt with, they have that, okay, this was my moment. Like, I'm done. But I've seen someone on the outside. We look at somebody that's addicted to a substance, and you're just like, why? Like, you've lost your home, you've lost your family, you've lost everything you worked for, and it's still not rock bottom. And so it all goes back to your mental health, or how your mind is wired. Technically,
think of it as an allergy. Now, when someone is allergic to peanuts,
mm-hmm.
and they have a PB&J or whatever, they have an abnormal reaction to peanuts, and their symptoms blur.
Mm-hmm.
When someone's allergic to alcohol or opiates, symptoms there's an abnormal reaction that happens, and this phenomenon of craving kicks in. And the phenomenon of craving is this piece in the brain that just gets green light. Go, get more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no red light. It just goes. And it overrides anything in the prefrontal cortex where there's meaning, there's values, there's all the things that matter to the person. It's just the midbrain going forward. That's the allergy piece.
Yeah.
That is now being understood by the medical field,
mm-hmm.
and is now being understood by the psychiatrist field. When it comes to the other piece, though, like, people that have a peanut allergy aren't stashing PB&Js in the garage mm-hmm. and sneaking out at 3 a.m. to scarf a couple of bites down and hide it from their wife. But we will do this with alcohol. We will do this with substances. So the other piece to substance use disorder is this forgetfulness of the consequences that have happened, and it just becomes this tunnel, kind of like we were talking about ADHD. It's become this like blinders where mm-hmm. you don't measure consequences because you've got this thinking going on that says, you know what, just one. It's just fine. Yeah,
Just one.
Just one. You just justify it. And then the whole cycle starts over.
Mm-hmm.
You kick in the allergy, and you can go, like, I know friends that have gone 14 years, dear close brothers and friends, gone 14 years. And that one voice kicks in and says, just one.
That's so fascinating. So my brother, my younger brother, he had a very addicted personality, and we could never understand. Like, he would just obsess over, and once he would be fixated on it, there was no turning that off. And it always worried me, even when I was young, that if he ever got into drugs or alcohol, which he never did, but and I've always kind of the knowledge that I know, obviously not to your level, but I look at guys or family members or vets or whatever that have these problems, I'm like, why can't they just stop? Like,
right.
How hard is it? I could have a drink and I could go years without, and so it's hard for somebody that's never battled or knows the psyche of someone's mind that has this issue.
Yeah.
And it's scary because I feel like there's so many parents that give up on kids because they just feel that their kid just wants to be a drug addict.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that kid is battling every day. He just has some sort of just chemical imbalance. I mean,
I want to go back and retract or clarify what I said when I used the words I couldn't stop.
mm-hmm.
I couldn't stop even after the charges came. I retract that and I said I couldn't stay stopped. So I could stop, but not for long. I couldn't stay stopped.
do you feel this crave that you had to, does it have to be in you? Is it like, is it something you missed? I mean, what draws somebody back knowing that, okay, you just had an unmarked car pull up, you see your doctor on the news station that you're working for. That's not, but is it like you miss the feeling? Like what is it that draws you back? I mean, obviously that switch is turned just enough to draw. You can stop, you didn't want to stop, or however you just phrase that. Like how does that feel? What does it feel like? Is it like a restlessness?
Yep.
I mean, so that's how you would explain it. You just, until you have it, and that's your calming, that's your coping mechanism, is like, okay, your ADHD or your depression or whatever, like that's what's calming you, and then you know that in the back of your head, like it's just one drink or it's just one line or one pill. I mean, and that's technically the mental state that you're in, or anybody that's battling an addiction like that.
Yeah, I couldn't have described that better.
Oh,
How you put the pieces together where it all ties into this feeling when you have untreated alcoholism, an untreated addiction, untreated ADHD, untreated anxiety disorder, untreated depression, or any others. It feels like you're doing time, even when you're not.
interesting.
You're in your own prison. It is misery. And if I'm going to be miserable, I'd rather be loaded and miserable than sober and miserable.
Interesting.
And that's the decision that's usually on the table. It's like,
If I'm
I'd rather
shit,
be
I might as well be high doing it.
I may as well medicate and numb, and or cross addiction, switch to addictive behaviors. A lot of people switch to sexual compulsivity.
Mm-hmm.
They'll switch to compulsive exercise.
Stealing.
Yep.
Shoplifting.
Yeah.
Shopping.
Yeah, spend. Yeah, like there's very so many, anything that you can get that little hit. But
Fix.
the issue is all of it is being untreated, and so I went through rounds of trying to stop, couldn't. The law would intervene because now I have charges.
Okay.
I ran from the law.
How'd you run from the law? You
Just went down to the streets. Yeah, just went to the streets.
What is your wife dealing with at this time? How is she processing this? Like, did she know? I mean, so at the time you have a job, so it's not like you're just on the streets at this point. Excuse me.
I got fired.
How long until they found out? Was it immediate?
They started to pick up on it when the DEA showed up at the office looking for me.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so a cop shows up, you get paperwork. Are you hiding this from your wife still?
Yeah, until I couldn't hide it.
Until you got fired.
Yeah.
And then you go home, tell your wife, hey, I got tied up into this ring.
Yep.
Lost my job. It's nationwide or statewide news. How did that go over?
I turned to my enabling parents and said I need help.
Really?
An attorney. And
They got it for
they
you.
got me an attorney.
You call them enabling parents. Did you know were they enabling you at this point, or did they start enabling you at this point?
My mom's words were, when I told her I had an addiction,
Okay.
it was the first time I ever admitted it.
So you admitted it. Okay. Which is I feel like that's a huge step in for anybody.
And I was crying, and I was in a lot of pain and sadness.
And your wife's still with you, or okay?
Yeah, this was when I broke the news to them, to my parents and her. And my mom's words were, "You're not an addict. No, you're not."
Mm.
And
Probably the worst thing she could have said.
and I said, "Maybe I'm not. Maybe she's right."
It's mom. They're always right.
And so that gave me just a little bit more, like, I guess, ammo to not stop the behavior, but just help me clean up this, this legal mess.
Okay.
And the legal mess was messy. And it
Sure, that drug on a lot.
up. Yeah. And
Nothing goes quick. And
I recycled through a lot of the stages of change, which is how I help family members understand where their addicted loved ones are at, or in one of these 6 stages.
Okay.
And the stages are pre-contemplation, which is I'm not ready to change.
okay.
Contemplation, which is maybe there's reasons to change.
Starting to realize there's an issue.
Mhm. And then there's preparation, and that's like in the next 30 days, I'm going to make it change.
Okay.
Behavior hasn't stopped. And then there's action, and action is sustained action for 6 months, and where you're doing it. You're sober,
Mm-hmm.
you're working recovery, that's action. And then there's maintenance. I like to call it transcendence, because maintenance is just like flat plateau.
Mm-hmm.
Transcendence is this level of emotional sobriety that I help my clients try to see and feel, where when you're sober, it's not miserable, but you thrive.
Okay.
You channel all of these gifts and diagnoses into your greatest superpowers, and then you get clear on a vision and take it and use it to help
Others, yeah.
and you kind of flip. And so all of the story,
That's not maintenance. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
yeah, it has meaning, and then a part of that, the stages,
What was the 6th one?
relapse.
Oh, I didn't know that was a stage.
It is, and the reason it's a stage is because the relapse stage helps resolve ambivalence.
What do you mean by that?
So ambivalence is when you're on the fence about the decision that you're making. So the thing about it is substance use disorders. Just take alcohol for an example. If you're a professional and alcohol is a part of your social life, and it's a part of your financial life, because you strike business deals out, after hours networking, which then it bleeds into your career. You may drink with your spouse, and that's kind of what you do. And all of a sudden, you start to think, if I don't have alcohol, like, what does all of this look like? All of it. And so there's this ambivalence of, like, I know I need to give it up, but I don't want to give it up. And I know I said I was ready to change, but I'm not sure now. I don't think I have a problem. So it's this kind of cyclical recycling through the stages of change. And relapse is one of those where that usually hits the pain, and we change at the speed of pain.
Okay.
So when we have a setback, it's like, damn,
Okay.
I gotta recommit.
Sorry.
They don't die. Yeah, they don't die, which is the other issue with relapse. Like, I don't.
Is that I mean, I want to get back to the story, but is that a pretty common thing? Because they just is it because they've cleansed and their body's kind of back on track, and then they go do they go back to the level that they were using before?
It's because the fentanyl is out.
Yeah,
And that one is just.
I definitely want to talk to you about that one. So you're in a world of shit right now. Your whole world's crumbling. Your mom obviously is enabling, which moms will do, parents will do. Where'd you go from there? I mean, obviously the court case, that's not cheap. You lost your job, and now your world has to be spiraling. Yeah. I would feel my world would be just spiraling out of control at this point.
Yeah. When I was running from my charges on the streets.
What do you mean running from your charges on the streets?
They couldn't get a hold of me. They couldn't find me.
You just went. You just went to the?
Just downtown Salt Lake, and lived homeless with the homeless people.
Did your? Okay, hold on.
No one really knew where I was.
You left your wife and went, or did you guys? Because I feel like my wife would move me down.
Yeah, we split. She said either you have to leave or I'm leaving, because it just got to that.
So you left and had nowhere to go. So you're on the streets downtown Salt Lake.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
That season, that winter that I lived down there, That's where a lot of the trauma happened. That's where, and I'm still working on.
I could imagine
some of that, and it was hard, man. It was. I feel for people who they don't get out of that.
Yeah.
It was an interesting dynamic for me because I wanted to be down there at the time because I had closer access to cheap drugs and alcohol. And when you don't have any money, that's where the hustle is. Okay. So the closer you are to the hustle, you can survive. If you're out there on your own, you're kind of like left up to just robbing houses and, cars, things like that. And then down there is where I got robbed. I remember
as a homeless person, what are they robbing you for?
Usually money.
Okay.
If you got any money, I had.
Are you panhandling? Are you working corners?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yep. You just do it, whatever to get by. Robbing people.
Really?
I got robbed. Screwdriver held up to my throat, pushed into my esophagus. I mean, luckily I made it out.
How long were you on the streets?
That whole winter.
Yeah. You did a whole winter in Salt Lake. That had to have been miserable.
It was a very dark time. It's hard for me to go back there. I mentally, it's hard for me to go back there because it's one of those places that I'll go in with my therapist.
Yeah. I mean, we don't
try to work on those experiences. But,
yeah.
I think you can imagine what it must.
It's got to be scary.
Just living, just surviving, and just depleted
every day,
and just afraid, just anxiety.
So there's got to be a ton of trauma that comes out of that.
Yeah.
A ton of PTSD. That, I mean,
it may be in a very different way than what you guys have
I feel that the term PTSD has been overtaken by veterans, and it's like our thing now. But everybody. I got hit by an 18-wheeler when I was a kid, and I didn't know I was in Canada, got hit by an 18-wheeler, and for years I was like, every time my mom would pass it, I would have this full like panic attack. I didn't know what it was, but it was 100% because I just thought I knew we were going to get hit, but it was just one of those things. Yeah. So, and I get it, but I mean, it's people have PTSD. I feel it's like it's a term tossed around very lightly. I feel like these days in the veteran world, but yeah, I feel like if I was living on the streets, saw the shit you saw, dealt with, fought off, and had to do to survive down there, there's some trauma and PTSD that comes out of that for sure.
Yeah.
It's a pretty dark time. So you were on there the whole winter. Spring comes around, and that's when you were back on. I mean,
then I get locked up.
You turned yourself in?
Yeah.
What? Why?
I just felt like jail was going to be
better option.
A little bit. Yeah. More comfortable.
Really?
I had to face a court.
Couldn't run from it from ever. You just so you weren't. I don't want to say evading, but dodging the police for. I mean, every day you're looking over your shoulder.
I guess you could say.
Is it just wear on you?
Yeah,
you just know.
You just get to the point where I was having many psychotic episodes.
As how?
Drug-induced psychosis when you, particularly with crack cocaine and with meth, crystal meth, those can induce psychosis, paranoia, just psychotic breaks at points where there's audible, visual hallucinations.
So, I don't mean this in any offensive way. I'm just asking you out of ignorance. When you see somebody on the streets and they're just having a full meltdown, you're like, "Okay, kids, like that's drugs." You see people on the. Is that what you're talking about? Were you having those types of states? Like, are you just? I don't know how to ask this question because I've never,
I'm visualizing the person you're describing.
I mean, are they those type of psychosis? I swear to what are words you use? Psychosis?
Drug-induced psychosis.
Psychos. Yeah. So is that what you're? That's what I'm picturing. So this is why I'm asking. Are you
I'm sure I looked different out there. I'm sure you would have grabbed your kids and
pointing at me like that? Don't do
Like,
drugs, kids. I mean,
maybe
is
keep away.
that the point that you were getting to because you just had so much stress and
yeah, when you're
anxiety and
up days and days and days, you don't sleep. You're not eating. I mean,
your body starts to shut down.
your brain
Yeah.
just kind of goes.
No water. Back to the water thing.
Just have water, man.
It's just water, right?
Keep 2 glasses and you're good. No, but yeah.
So you turn yourself in.
Well, I showed up to court. I decided to show up to court
okay.
for my date because I knew things were going to get real bad if I missed that again.
Okay.
So they ended up cuffing me there.
Red as you walk in?
Yeah, they just took me.
Okay, understandable.
So I spent a year, and when I say in and out, my out was a few days because they would let me out and then I would have to drug test and I couldn't pass it and then they would send me back in. So
You couldn't go a couple days, huh?
I couldn't.
The second you were free?
Second I was free. It just happened.
Crazy.
And I think at that point you really kind of subscribe to this idea that you're going to die this way.
You just accepted it. Mm-hmm. This is it.
So I'm either going to end it or it's going to end one way or the other.
That's really sad.
Just kind of exist and survive. It is a life of just
Surviving.
yeah, just plain survival. And it's sad, but it's like, I think for the person, you're a little bit past feeling. And so there's this numbness
Okay.
from maybe the trauma and the protection that you've built up over your heart and your thoughts. And so you kind of get to that space where you don't really feel mad or sad, or you really just feel either high or angry.
Okay.
Like, yeah, there's really no other emotion that I can describe when you're in that state.
So when you were locked up, were you detoxing and then you'd come, then they let you out and you'd go right back on, then you'd have to detox again? I mean, was that the cycle you were on?
It was, yeah.
So are you on heroin? I mean, what are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Alcohol, crack cocaine, and heroin were the main 3.
Which are, I mean, alcohol, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the most dangerous to kick, right? I mean, isn't alcohol the one you could only die from, like from the
DTs.
from the detox, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in heroin, I feel is an absolute horrible thing to kick. So still isn't enough in your mind to be like, fuck, I'm not. And
You would think.
then you didn't let you out, and then you just right back to it.
Yeah, what's interesting is, like, when you... here's the other piece of addiction that's baffling to people, is when someone is making... So I'll just talk about me. When I was making promises to my ex-wife, I meant them. And when I was making promises to the judge in a letter, telling him that if I relapse again, you can lock me away in prison and throw away the key, I made every promise that if he let me out, I would stay sober. I meant that, like, to my core. The piece of powerlessness when it comes to drugs and alcohol is that I don't have the will when that insanity kicks in. And what happens to the brain is it just says go, and you don't think about the consequences. You don't think about anything other than you're just driven to that behavior. And that is, I've heard it, some of my research, I've heard it described as when you're addicted, you live in 15-minute increments. And so you're surviving 15 minutes at a time. And this 15 minutes that you just survived, maybe you made promises to your family. Maybe you made promises to the judge.
Yourself.
And you meant, you meant every single word. Well,
30
imagine
minutes later,
that scene closes, a new scene opens, and those two scenes don't coincide or connect whatsoever in the brain. And so you could leave that scene, and the next thing you know, you're texting or calling your dealer, and you aren't even thinking about what just went down.
That is,
And it is a mental illness. I mean, that's the thing is you would think they could keep the promise. But
you see it all the time.
I remember that experience clearly. Of course, at the time I didn't, but I remember that happening all the time.
I mean, you see kids that go in these rehabs, and I helped a father once take a kid to rehab. It was a traumatic experience for me because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I thought I was just helping. Long story short, the kid was, just begged, "Dad, I'll stop." It was sad as a dad. It killed me. I couldn't even imagine my kid in the back seat, handcuffed, getting taken to a rehab, begging, and then he listening to his dad talk about, he's told me this before. How long is this going? I'm like, I believe the kid. I'm like, he said he's done. Like, do we have, But it was just, it's a cycle. And he's like, this is a cycle. We have to break the cycle. And how many promises have you made to your mom and I? And he's like, I mean it. And then on the long drive home, we drove this kid for all day to this rehab, and we drove all night back. And I was like, man, like, I'm sorry. He's like, he's like, don't be. We've heard these promises.
How's he doing now?
He was good for a little while, and then got back into the friend scene, and then I think it just get pulled right back into it.
Yeah.
So
this is a perfect example. Did he mean those promises? Absolutely.
100%.
100%.
As a dad, I believe the kid. He was a little shithead. I'm like, the little kid needs his ass whooped is what he needs. But like when you see, I think once it started hitting this kid, like this is the situation. Like you're going. Like there's no getting out of this now. Like hours into this ride and him fighting for hours. I had this kid handcuffed, belly restrained because he was tearing apart this truck. He broke a seat. And it's not easy to I feel bad for cops because like to restrain somebody without hurting them. You're in this world it's very hard. Like when you just want to just choke somebody out or just hit them, knock some sense. And this is a child. I'm trying to like not hurt this kid, and we're both sweating in this back seat. And I'm just telling myself, I'm like, I gotta help this dad. I gotta help. He's a buddy of mine. Like I'm here to help. I didn't sign up for any of this. But then the kid, when he passed out, went to sleep for a while, wakes up, and that's when like his whole demeanor changed. It was almost like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Totally.
And like I was believing the kid.
Yep.
And I was like, like he means it. And he's like, no, he doesn't. Like we can't. And that's when. Yep. So it's interesting you say that because I swear, I'll never do. I'll delete everything. And the kid was just vomiting just to try to sell it. And at the time, I'm like, oh, he's just trying to sell it. Once a dad explained to me, but like now that you're explaining this, he probably truly meant it. The kid was bawling his eyes out and apologizing. He's like, I don't mean it. Like, I don't know. Like, he was confused. And so, now that I'm having this conversation with you, it's, damn, like the kid he probably did mean it, but it's just in that cycle.
That's ambivalence. That's it. Is this true desire to want
this
to
has opened
change.
up my mind so much. I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I have family family cousins. You hear these stories where the parents are spending their whole life savings, taking out second mortgage on their homes to send their kids to these rehabs, and they get back out. So
to tie into this, can I?
Yeah, 100%, man.
Okay, so-
I feel like so many people are going to be. This is such a great conversation because, there's there's so much out there, but like
we could do a year of episodes and
there's so
but
much. I hope there's parents listening to this that can just realize where their kids are at, or where their husbands or brothers or sisters are at mentally. It's not them. We're battling something that they cannot turn off.
That's right.
But it's so easy to point, oh, the guy's a junkie.
Yep.
Oh, he's a functioning alcoholic. It's so easy to put a title on
half
someone.
of that person is. Like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, you described that perfectly. It is truly, it is like you're dealing with two
100%.
people. And I named my addict side Sancho.
Sancho, huh?
Probably was a Sublime song.
Sancho. I actually just introduced my kid to Sublime not too long ago.
Well, okay, Santeria.
Yep.
You know that song?
Great song.
Yeah, that's the one I used to karaoke to at the bars. Yeah, that was always a good one. But the idea of this is number one, when someone is going through this process, doesn't necessarily mean that you don't continue to help from a natural consequences standpoint. So I think this is a perfect example of this kid, because the dad, in his best judgment, given all his experiences and history of being manipulated or getting his hopes up and it coming crashing down and the whole thing, he is justified to allow natural consequences, because it is natural consequences that help resolve ambivalence.
Okay.
And so we have to have, I mean, you think about anything that you have quit or given up, you go through that breakup. It's like a toxic girlfriend. And it's like, okay, this isn't working anymore. So you break up. But now it's Christmas time and I need someone to hang out with. And maybe she's changed.
Maybe I've changed.
Maybe I bet we could do this again.
It's good for a little bit, and then it goes right back to it.
It's very much the same kind of
That's
dynamic.
a great way of putting that.
It's a love affair, and it's
Yours just
also a powerlessness in the brain. So, like, for example, even after as I sit here today, I'm over 15 years absent of any mood or mind altering drugs. So I'm in recovery for 15 plus years.
Good for you.
Thank you. And you know how I know I still have this disease? I will have using dreams where I'm hunting for crack cocaine.
Really?
My mom doesn't dream about hunting for crack cocaine. And neither does my wife.
But it's there.
I have this thing. And that's my reminder of my powerlessness, is because I can't control my dreams. And I still will go through these episodes in my dreams where there's the whole hunt, there's the whole using, there's the anxiety, there's the fear. I wake up as if I just experienced it.
Do you have that rush when you wake up? Are you waking up like...
It's like this relief that I don't have to change my sobriety date, and this relief that was just a nightmare.
Yeah, a nightmare. Good. Yeah, exactly.
And people that have substance use disorder have these dreams.
Interesting.
And that's, I think, a gift, a reminder that if I were to go out after this and have a beer, that I don't have power over it. And that's the reminder. So when we talk about the father and the boundaries, this is one way to begin helping an addicted loved one or someone who's just engaged in behaviors that are not okay. And that the advice came through. So I'm going to place myself now from homelessness to incarceration. Then I got ordered to treatment.
Okay,
So
yeah,
I'm in
that's
treatment.
exactly where I wanted to go next with this.
And I'm learning some things about
Treatment
recovery,
as in how, like, what is this, are you in the system?
residential.
You're in
rehab.
residential living at this point?
And this residential treatment center was contracted with the courts. So I'm in a drug court residential treatment
How
center.
is that living condition? And the only reason I ask is I've known people that have gone to these, and the drug use was almost just as bad in there than it was on the streets. Was this one of those situations?
This is one of those.
Okay.
This is where I survived my overdose. Was in treatment.
You overdose in a tree, which I've heard other.
My first overdose too. This was the first
You've
time.
overdosed more than once?
Yeah. This one was the first time someone shot me up with heroin, and it was too much, and I overdosed. They just slapped me around to keep me awake, and they didn't tell the staff, but they just kept me alive. Yeah, they just kept me alive until I finally came out of it. And
How long is a heroin high? How long does that last?
well, this one, it was all night. They were.
Because it was too much, obviously.
Yeah, it was way too much. And I really should have died. And again, I attribute a lot of this to a power overlooking me.
Look where you're at now.
Exactly. Like, it's very clear to me that I needed to somehow stay alive, and
Yeah.
miracle upon miracle. But the lesson that
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. How many days were you in this clinic or rehab?
which time I went through
First time.
5.
How many days were you in it before you got introduced to
60 days.
How long,
Oh,
how long were you in it
probably
before you
a
got
month.
introduced to drugs, and then how long were you in it before you overdosed?
Well, the drugs were in there the whole time.
So from day one, you knew that there was drugs.
Yeah.
How are they
And
not?
I was smuggling them in too.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's just kind of how people do it when you're in pre-contemplation. You don't want to stop.
They're not
You're
testing in there. You're not getting piss tested every day.
They just cheat them. Back then, the system was really easy to cheat drug tests. You could sneak urine, or people would go out on a pass or a furlough to see their families and bring in urine and sell it.
Okay.
Like, there's ways. There's a whole black
dudes are slinging piss, clean
Slinging
piss,
piss, dude.
in rehab.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's lucrative too.
Oh, yeah. It's liquid gold, man. As long as it's clean.
Crazy to think about.
Yeah, it is. There's a whole underworld that I was exposed to, and I got worse. And I think that's a huge part of recovery is who you surround yourself with. You stick with the winners, and you become a winner. You know, they say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
For sure.
And if you're hanging out with 5 losers that are using, and that's what I
Show you your friends.
exactly, and I'll show you your future. Yeah, I can't remember who said that.
There's been a few people, but it's great. It's a great. It's the most one of those quotes that there's no denying.
Yeah,
No denying
it
that.
was like Jim Rohn or someone. But anyway, the reality was, like, I was getting worse. This was the time where my wife was thinking, okay, the divorce is either going to be final or he's going to change.
Oh, so you're still
We were
married.
separated.
Okay.
And so she was kind of watching how I do, and I'm getting worse. And that was the first place that I tried meth. That was the first place I already explained it, overdose with a needle.
God.
And I picked up smoking there too. Cigarettes, yeah. Never had a smoking habit until rehab. And then my parents, so let's talk about this parallel track that my parents engaged in. They started going to this family class, and the therapist in there, keep in mind, like, I free reign to my parents' house when I'm in my addiction. So anytime they're out of town, they love to travel, I go in.
Are you stealing things?
Stealing things, I'm pawning their stuff, I'm looking for...
Typical addict.
Yep. Like, I took my dad's rare coin collection and went and cashed it in for $50, and it was, I mean, the value he tells me that is now.
Oh my! He's
I'm
still
just like,
probably mad about that one.
He is. We just talked about it, actually. Just recently, and it still stings.
Oh man!
If only I go back and get that for him, man, because sadly, my dad now is, he and I are best friends, and he's battling stage 4 cancer.
I'm sorry, man.
It's spread to his brain, so we don't have a lot of time left, but we talk about these things in a different light now because of
I can imagine.
beautiful relationship that we have.
Good for you.
As he was learning with my mom, the therapist said, Janet and Doug, imagine Jason out in the middle of a lake, and he is in a boat, and with every addict decision, he's dropping a boulder in the water. And you're on the beach yelling to him, stop, just stop. You got so much potential. Mm-hmm. And he's out there without a care in the world,
Just hucking boulders.
just hucking them. And those ripples, by the time they get to the beach, are tsunami size, crashing over my parents' heads. Mm-hmm. They're taking the brunt of all of it. And the therapist said, Doug and Jenna, get off the beach. You don't have to stand there anymore. And that was the first time they were given permission to separate themselves from what my addiction was doing to them.
Because it's clearly affecting them if you're pawning and
You
taking.
can imagine the friction they had, because my dad was angry. My mom was hurt, trying to save me. Mm-hmm. And so they're now
That
having
wears,
arguments.
yes, that wears on a couple. I mean, how many you see it all the time? The parents split over.
Yep. And then you got the finances, which is like, do we pay for his mortgage? Do we pay for his rent? Do we, like, he doesn't have a car? Do we help? And so they get in financial, it's an issue.
And
It
clinics
affects the whole
clinics aren't
family.
cheap.
Exactly.
Rehabs aren't cheap.
So
So what did they do?
they were given the permission to get off the beach. And so their first step was the physical boundaries. And then there's the emotional boundaries, which I call the emotional raincoat.
How did you take that?
And the first boundary they set was, Jason, you're not allowed in our house anymore. We changed the locks. And if you ever come over, we have to be there. And you're only allowed in the common areas. So like the kitchen and the lobby, living room, which is just where you're not allowed to go into the bedrooms. You're not allowed to go downstairs. You're not allowed. And my reaction was to do what I do, which is gaslight them. Make them think they're crazy for doing that. Make them feel like they're horrible people.
Is that a typical addict response?
Totally.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Gaslighting is yeah.
Why are you doing
If
this?
I can flip this so that you feel like you're the crazy one,
Okay.
like that the advice that you're getting is brainwashing you to separate us in our relationship, to hurt our relationship, and then just blame, take no responsibility. And I was really pissed. Now I'm proud of them.
Yeah.
Because that was the first time they held it.
So, as a parent, your parents or any parent, you hear like the tough love. You gotta pull the umbilical cord. You gotta pull the lifeline. Is that a good I mean, that's technically what happened in this situation. They're pulling the plug on your lifeline. Is that something that is a good option or a play for parents to do early on, or does it have to get to a certain stage? Because I feel like as a father, it'd be so hard for me to cut my kids off, even no matter what the situation is. The walk from them, knowing they're on the street. Fuck, it would kill me knowing this. Is that a tough love play, a smart play in this world or in these situations, or is it a case by case? Because you hear people just cut them out, stop enabling them, don't pay for it, let them figure it out, let them hit rock bottom. But for an addict, what is rock bottom? Death?
Right.
So is this like a case by case?
Yeah.
I mean, are some people you cut off and then they go straight to the streets and you never see them again? I mean, how do they know to do this?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm asking this correctly, but
yeah, very clear. I get these questions every day. Every day.
And do you go off of the level of abuse, or is it just like, hey, they've been in this cycle of addiction for years now, and you've been along with them for all these years, it's time to pull that plug type of deal? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, as a dad that would have a kid that's going through this, of any situation, is there a stage where do you do it immediately, or does it have to get to a certain point before you pull that plug and start putting the boundaries up? What's the best scenario for that? I guess it would be my question.
Great question. The case by case is not what people want to hear, but that's the answer.
Okay.
And the reason is the dynamics and the complexities of any relationship
It's all different.
are going to play in. So is this person an adolescent or is this person an adult?
Okay.
Does this person have the ability to have gainful employment, or does this person not? What's the history? What stage of change are they in? Not only what stage of change are they in, but what stage of change are they in around the other life domains? For example, some individuals will get sober, but they will just flop and stay in the flop house and play video games all day, drink caffeine all day, smoke cartons of cigarettes all day, and need to ask them for money, and some parents are like, what do I do with this? Because he's sober.
Okay. He's sober, but not bettering themselves. They're not making any. They're not heading in the right direction.
Yeah,
They're stagnant.
So he's in pre-contemplation in career. He's in pre-contemplation in finance, still dependent. Mm-hmm. But he's active in his treatment. So he's going to treatment. And so it gets complex when, and in my book, I have the graphics that really help. Imagine for the listeners, imagine like a pizza, and the pepperoni circles in each slice are the stages of change, like the wheel of the stage of change: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, or transcendence, and relapse. Okay, and you got those circles inside those slices. So the slice is finance. Where in the stages of change is
so you have to break down every slice.
So
in a way,
correct, and it, depending on what's important to the relationship. So if it's okay that said individual flops, which then there doesn't need to be a change because both of you are okay with that.
Got it.
But if there's something that's creating friction, then that's where I lead the families to say, okay, this is where you come up with an agreement. So when you can, strong fences make great neighbors.
Yes.
Setting up strong fences in and around what the expectations are helps manage the relationship. So if you are in a relationship with, you brought up your daughter, I don't know the situation at all. So if this was a real scenario, I would be asking a lot of questions in and around, okay, does she live with you? Is she an adolescent?
Are you asking me? Right? Oh, yeah. She's an adolescent, but just for everybody listening, I don't.
Right.
This is
Hypothetical. Okay, let's say you had a son. Let's say you had a son.
You're like, BS daughter's an addict. I mean,
No.
They answer those questions.
Yeah. You're safe. We're not.
Yeah. And I read and I ask these questions just as a father, and I see, well, not even just in case. I'm seeing these things playing out. I'm watching other people's kids, and from an outside perspective, like I have a very tight relationship with my kids. We're very close. We communicate everything, so they tell me things, what's going on with their friends, and how things are changing so fast, and their parents don't know. So it's scary. So I've had friends and things that anyways, that's a whole other tangent, but that have battled these types of things, and loved ones and relatives and veterans and brothers and just people that I'm very close with. So that's the reason I have these questions, because I feel that, you hear them and you can see these TV shows, but like I feel like this is such a great conversation, just explaining, like, as a, when do you pull the plug, when, boundaries and things like that. So anyway,
sounds like you and your kids have such a good relationship of trust and rapport, which is a component, the ingredient of the foundation upon where influence can be made. And so when I talk and help coach and guide family members, it's really the process of getting to that place where there is a trust and rapport. Because if you don't have it, so let's just we'll bring it back to my parents.
Let's shift gears here. I want to, let's jump into, this is a great tie. Like, I'm going to ask this question. As a father, where are you seeing these kids? What homes? Because they come from all sorts of, from probably very poverty-ridden homes to the wealthiest kids in these states. They're all using, and they all find some sort of substance along the way. Is there a common factor? Is it coming from broken homes that you're starting to see a lot of younger kids? And another reason I just talk about it because I'm a dad, teenagers. Are you seeing it come from broken homes, from healthy homes, from parents that come from addiction? Is there a common denominator in that people can hear and be like, okay, like we're seeing these steps where there's starting to be these check boxes we're hitting as far as our kids are starting to go down a path? Is it friends? Is it peer pressure? Is it school? I'm sure it's a little bit all of the above, but is there something that when you're dealing with teenagers, young adults, is there anything that you're like, oh, yep, that's a key factor in what led them down this path?
Yeah, I think the American Society of Addiction Medicine has laid out dimensions that when any clinical assessment is given to diagnose someone with substance use disorder, I think it's telling and an indicator of what leads into this type of struggle or this development of the neural pathways that create the hook, or of course there's the genetic piece, and that's part of the dimensions. It's also looking at the mental health side, and some individuals have diagnoses that the symptoms are more likely to turn to substance.
As in what, depression?
ADHD is a common one. Anxiety disorder, for sure. I would say that untreated borderline personality disorder is fairly common. I mean, I could go down the list because I'm just thinking of all of the co-occurring disorders I've seen in my
that are going to increase
clients.
the percentage of becoming dependent
Yeah,
on something.
because when they're untreated, they're, one of the symptoms is compulsive behavior. And so a compulsive decision to use might lead them down that path, but it might be a compulsive decision to pornography, for example, or any of the dangerous behaviors that could lead someone down and losing themselves in a addiction. And I think that where your question really lies is like, okay, what are some of the indicators? Environment definitely plays into it. What's the home like? What's the structure like? What are the parents like? What's the history there? How early were they exposed? What's the frequency of their use? What's the pattern? Did they have periods of sobriety, periods of not of swapping? They talk about legal pressure, so we're talking about outside pressure. So a lot of those dimensions. If someone, let's just say someone does, like for example me, I got arrested for shoplifting when I was 16. Those legal pressures do increase my anxiety, do increase the symptoms, and yeah, I want to use more.
Got it.
Those 6 dimensions are really fascinating because they point to the precursors of prevention. And so loving homes, emotionally available parents, which not all kids have.
It's a hard thing.
Yeah.
It's a very hard thing. And that's one thing I struggled with for a long time, because being girl dad, I had a hard time finding that connection emotionally. It's like they'd be just crying over math homework, and what the fuck are we crying over math homework for? It's just math, like, I'm like, hey, they're girls, like, they're not Marines, they're not little boys, they're not your son, like, these are. And so it took her just constant, and then finally it just I'm like, okay, like, cry over math, like, okay, like, were we done? Okay, let's fit it. So, I mean, it's very hard. I feel like for myself, that was one of my big hurdles as a dad, a girl dad, is being emotionally there for them and knowing that they could come to me for those types of things. And it was not easy for a long time, but now really you have to stop, take that, okay, like, instead of just giving that response that would come naturally, I feel like my dad would have given me, they're not sons. And that's what my wife is always for long. They're not your sons. They're your daughters. And then once that finally clicked, I was like, oh, okay, like, I've screwed up a lot. So thank God it was a while ago, and I've really, 180 on that. But I completely see that. It's hard to connect. And I feel like a lot of guys, it might be hard for them, especially coming from maybe a military law enforcement alpha world where it's programmed into us. We don't cry. We keep charging no matter what, finish the mission type of deal. And then you get thrown into being a girl dad and having to rewire everything that you've ever, from sports, from being an athlete to all of a sudden I'm dealing with a daughter, and that was another big thing. And then with my daughters competing, they fight competitively. It's like, why are we crying? My wife's like, because they're a fucking girl. You're right. So
Because emotions.
they have emotions, so that's a big thing, I feel like. And then once I've been able to connect with that, it's like, okay, then it's a whole different level. So I feel that is a very important part of being a parent. I feel like it's one of the most important parts, is being there emotionally for them, boys or girls.
Yeah, my therapist would say, Jason, you got to feel it to heal it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to allow my kids to honor their feelings, instead of stuff them or think it's okay to not feel that or emote or, cry. And that one's tough too. I've got a daughter and a son, and they're twins. And is my greatest fear is having a daughter, because I am so protective over her.
It's so hard.
And I'm learning and slobbering my way through. And some of the pieces to prevention, I think, also tie into those that are already in the pit. And how do you help someone like avoid this pit? But also, what do you do when someone's in this pit? And I just gave a lecture on this one principle, and I think it's worthy of bringing in at this point, which is that when someone has an addiction and it's deep, the ingredient for change has to be volition.
What do you mean by that?
I will not get sober and stay sober and live a life of recovery unless it's on my own volition, unless I choose it, which means there has to be something deep and meaningful that motivates that.
Your why.
My why. And my why sadly had to come after so much pain, and luckily, people can change before they get to this point. But when I was in and out of jail, I discovered that this gal was pregnant with my child. I don't know what happened. We just went to coffee. It was strong coffee, I guess. And we decided to place him for adoption, and there's a whole story in and around this. But I think the key point to this piece is this is where things changed for me internally.
Because when you found out you were having a kid?
It's actually when he was born. I got a text message the day he was born, and keep in mind I didn't know the birth mom really at all. It was just one of those things, and I was in and out of jail during the pregnancy and just kind of out of the picture, and so I didn't know when he was going to be born. I was in denial. I didn't even think it was going to be my kid. It was one of those, which I'm really ashamed about at this point. So we get to that day that he was born, May 8th, so he just celebrated 17 years in his birthday, May 8th of 2007, and I get this text that says, "Your son Nathan was born today. He looks like you. Do you want to meet him?" And I held him for the first time. I went out and I held him for the first time. And I didn't want to connect with him or bond with him because obvious reason is I knew that.
Did you just know we
were placing him for adoption? But I knew he was mine. Like clear as day. It looks exactly like me. Like exactly like my baby pictures. And he still does look like me. I'll just show you a picture. He looks like Eminem with me with Eminem hair, his spiky blonde. He's a stud. So, God has a way of influencing us at these times. And so I was up at the hospital, and they learned that he was going to be there for 1 week because of his respiratory and his medical stuff. And bam, it was during that week where I couldn't not bond with him. Like I had the choice of going up to the hospital or not, and I'm so grateful I chose to go.
Good.
And that connection happened, and I see him fighting for his life.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Was the mom a user as well?
She was sober during the pregnancy, but...
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we both have this disease. And to her credit, if Nate or if she ever hears this podcast, to her credit, I have to hand it to her that she was able to stay clean the entire pregnancy.
That's awesome.
God.
It's not an easy thing for someone. So these are non-use related problems that he had.
Right. Although I felt like it was my fault. I I was feeling so much during this time as I was watching him fight for his life, and here I was squandering mine, and I didn't know if I was ever going to see him again after the adoption. So I wrote him a letter, and this is back in that moment where I meant every word, and I've made him promises that I was going to change my life for him, that I didn't want him to grow up thinking that his birth dad didn't love him and just threw him away, or that his birth dad was junky. And that was when I felt deep down in that I wanted to change. Not because of the courts, not because of my ex, not because of others. It was a spiritual moment of, I'm going to rise up. It's time. It's time to put this old guy away and become someone different. Because
do you remember how it felt? Were you excited? Were you nervous? Was it like a natural feeling? Were you ready for it? I mean, do you remember like, okay, like this is happening?
Yeah, I was so empowered.
Really?
I was looking forward to it. It was this new, it was this psychic change. It was this new experience. But I didn't have the tools, man. I didn't have the support. I didn't know that I had a disease that I had to put in remission one day at a time, and I didn't realize.
Scary. There's so many people that don't never figure this out.
No, and so I didn't stay sober. I couldn't cope with
how long.
shame.
How long were you sober?
Maybe a couple of days.
Oh, really?
Maybe.
Do you remember feeling how it felt after you used?
After the high of feeling empowered in that moment, an experience,
then you
followed by the shame of I couldn't rise up, and the grief, the loss of placing my son into the
system,
the family, and not knowing if I was going to see him again.
Yeah,
a lot of shame with that one, and I'm happy to report that the adoption was open, and throughout the grief and the loss, the family, the Martins, they would send me pictures at the most perfect times to remind me of my why. They would just show up in the mail or show up at my parents' house because I was transient. And then I would see these pictures of him.
So you're still on the streets.
This was, I was kind of in and out of different apartments, trying to pull my life together, but I kept slipping back, and then I'd go to jail.
And then you get a photo.
Yeah, I'd get a photo. And they would just come and remind me of my why. And you know, that piece, the volition, is the ingredient that once I added some tools onto it, and this all happened after I had a psychotic break, where I barricaded myself in this little apartment. I was so lost. Like I'd been up for days and days and days, hadn't slept. I was back on the hard stuff, and I was hallucinating and the whole bit. And I had barricaded myself in this apartment that my parents were paying for, and beeping out the windows and everything. And I had another experience, which was like I could see two paths in my mind's eye, but it was so vivid, man. It was as if I was in it. It's hard to really describe this, but one path I could see down clearly, and it was like this world opened up, and it was in a sewer life, and there was graffiti everywhere, and it was just cement, and there were people that were just the stuff I saw when I was homeless. Just this total animalistic, scary, dark destiny. Looked like hell. And then this other vision opened up where I could see mountains and green grass and pines and a lake And I remember seeing this horse, and I was like calming the horse. And I didn't need any other message than that. It was like, this is it. And I asked for help.
How?
And I called up Dave Pinniger, who had gotten sober 3 years before me. And he was like me. He was as crazy like me, and he had been 3 years sober. I was like, dude, I need help.
Was that a pretty hard phone call to make? Or was it
not after that moment?
Seeing that?
Not after that moment. Like I was like, I want this.
Okay.
And he drove down from Idaho, and I was down in Salt Lake. He drove down from Idaho the next morning, 6 a.m. Came and scooped me up, got me packed up and ready. We had to clean that apartment. I mean, he had 2 big, huge bags of paraphernalia that we ended up having to get rid of. And he took me and dropped me off at the detox psych ward to get me straightened out. And then that's when I went into my 5th treatment program. And the difference between that treatment program and previous ones is this one was private, and it was people that were there on their own volition.
Oh, okay. So would you now, experiencing 2 different worlds of treatments and obviously having your own facilities, are the state-funded ones just a complete joke, or do you see any help that comes out of those versus a private one? I mean, I'm sure there's still drugs getting smuggled in the private ones. I mean, I'm sure these ones doesn't sit on the beaches in Laguna and overlook the ocean. I mean, I'm sure there's still the same problems, but like, is it almost just setting people up to fail when they go to these state-funded ones?
I always tell people when they are asking about where to go to treatment, instead of just saying you should come to Brick House. You know, I'm not sure if Brick House is a good fit for them, because what I want them to feel out is wherever you can connect with the tribe, that's where you should go.
Okay.
And so if you are checking out a state-funded, you know, a lot of the people there are not there on their own volition, and so you have to be ready for that. Mm-hmm. That there's going to be a level of maybe dishonesty and
for sure
and lack of motivation. But a lot of people can't afford the private, and so a lot of them do recover in those settings. They just have to be ready, and they have to find their tribe, stick with the winners in that mix.
Got it.
So they can still get the help. Those seeds can still be planted. They can grow, and the harvest can still come. It's just, you got to understand the environment and the stages of change that everyone, and not become like them, like I did. Not gravitate towards the losers. The private experience is, for those that have that opportunity, is absolutely a different feel, a different experience. Usually in a nice facility, therapists usually get paid a little bit more, so you get higher quality,
more qualified
therapists. And this one was a faith-based one, not a religious, but one that really emphasized the importance of the soul sickness, because you can fix the mind and you can get the body healthy with water and meds and nutrition. But what about the soul, the spirit? What about that? And most of us are spiritually anorexic when we're in our disease, in addiction.
Interesting.
And that spiritual anorexia is real. And so it's really about trying to feed the milk before the meat, and just help them discover their meaning and purpose and worth.
Yeah.
And that process of recovery is beautiful. That's where emotional spring goes. That's where prosperity comes and abundance. And we can thrive in that. And so 2 years after Nate was born, I was able to see him actually before I checked in.
Was this the first time you were able to like see him in person?
I've seen him a couple of times.
Okay, so the family's pretty cool. I mean, they're sending you pictures, and they allowed you to come see. So
yeah, I probably met him 3 or 4 times
in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah, something like that.
So you got to see him right before you went in.
I did, and so I had that.
How was that? Like holding your son?
It was cool. It
knowing like, okay, I'm ready. Like that has to be a pretty impactful moment. Like, okay, like you're the reason, like I'm finally getting my life. You need more of this.
Yeah.
You know, so that has to be a pretty cool feeling. Like knowing you're ready because of this human being that you brought into the world is the reason that you've gone through hell from teenage years to 27 now, 26-ish, maybe a little older. And now like that was your aha, like you're so many. I know a father, he's got a great son, and him and his baby mom, I guess we'd call it, they were both addicts, and the second he found out he's having a son, he had his brother handcuff him in the basement to detox, and he never touched again. That was it. He was a hardcore user and lifelong, and the second he found out he's having a son. So I mean, it's a thing, you know, but there's also a lot of people that don't even bat an eye at having a child and could ever think about it again. So I mean, I guess you just got to find that why. So you go to rehab. It's a private one. You get the help. How long was the rehab?
60 days. 60 days. And
then you came out. How was it? How was the... I don't want to say it's harder at first, because I feel like once you're in this world, it's always a battle. Every day is a battle. I have buddies that are sober, and every day is a battle for them. Was it like a no-brainer coming out, or was there any relapse? I mean, what was the process from coming out of this private clinic? You finally got the help that you needed. You don't have your son, but you have access and be able to see your son, getting updates on him. Was that it, or was there any hiccups along the way?
No hiccups as far as use. Good. I've been sober ever since.
Good for you.
March 19th, 2009 is my sober date, and the two things that I came out of that treatment program with that changed the game versus the other times I left treatment and fell and relapsed is number one is I had a sense of belonging. I had a tribe of dudes that I was in there with. It was all men, and there was a brotherhood.
Okay.
And there were a couple of guys that really made recovery attractive, that were coming to the alumni meetings, and they were in their first year, and they were, you know, out doing fun things like planning trips to San Diego to go to AA meetings on the beach and having fun that way. And, you know, they were wakeboarding. And
so you're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I'm seeing like an attractive brand of living sober.
That have gone through what you've been through. Uh-huh. They've been in the trenches with you.
Yeah. And they were having a blast doing it. And so I gravitated to this group, and we're still dear brothers to this day. So I had a belonging, and I had a tribe, and they helped protect me from a couple of potential slips.
Okay.
Where the disease was
creeping.
Yep. And the other piece is that I finally felt like I had reconciled my relationship with my higher power.
Good.
Because that was a big barrier for me. And that process was cool.
So when you say spiritual based, explain that to me, because it's obviously, does it focus on one, not like a religion, but just as in your God conscience in these things? How does that work? Because I'm sure the last thing on somebody that's battling an addiction is like, okay, I want to be connected back with God or I'm a Christian, so like I can talk, and that, like when you say spiritual, how does that, and we can get into I would like to get into how you started your clinics and that whole path as well, which we'll jump into, but what is a spiritual based recovery center? I mean, is it talking, having conversations with God? Is it praying? Is it right? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, that I think that does deserve some clarification. There are some that are attached to particular churches.
Okay.
And they have, their annex that's a sober living, and then, their residents have to read the Bible. They have to do what that church sets up.
Okay.
What we do is open-ended and broad and all welcoming. And so the idea is that if they are willing to come in and just leave the door cracked to the concept of a higher power, the God of their understanding, based in the 12 steps. Because 12 steps are evidence-based and they work. I mean, they do work if you're open to it. And so the God of your understanding, the idea is we do pray before all of our groups. We talk about the wrestle that most people have with spirituality, resentments to, some have religious trauma, some have been beaten down with in the name of God. So unless that stuff gets out and like sorted through, it's kind of like this process where we're sitting at this beautiful table and it's like putting out all your beliefs on the table, all of them, and reanalyzing them in a way that makes a repacking of your belief system work for you, and leave the rest.
Okay.
Because there is some stuff that can get confusing there. So how I was led to do this was an assignment when I was on step 2, which is come to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity.
For sure.
And I was like, I got a problem. She said, what's your problem? And maybe she knew. Like, I don't know how I'm going to ever get to a point where I can trust God, because here's the thing is I had God as an archetype of my own dad.
Okay.
Who was disappointed, unavailable, emotionally angry, and didn't want anything to do with me.
Which isn't the case.
Which is, so how do you turn your will and your life over to someone that you feel is that way?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just where I was at the time. And so she said, okay, I want you to do an assignment. And I thought it was the dumbest assignment ever. I will. I mean,
I'm in this program.
So I want you to go and start describing who and what your ideal higher power looks like, is like, what hobbies, personality traits, characteristics, and just start. And so it was like missing skiing so bad, dude. I was like, because I snow ski and just absolutely love the mountains. And so I was like, well, first and foremost, he skis.
Chases powder.
He chases powder, but not those lines. So he skis, plays the guitar with me. He likes to go fishing, likes the outdoors. He understands my pain, understands what addiction's like. All forgiving, all knowing, always available, unconditionally loving. And I just kept going, like what I described, like what he, for me, it's I call him God and Heavenly Father, and I described like this stud, this intimate but also infinite, and there's this balance because you don't want to go too far in one where if he's infinite, he's untouchable and unrelatable,
which isn't the case.
And if he's too intimate, then he may not be seen as having the power to help you overcome it. It's just a buddy like you're just hanging out.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's this
balance,
this Goldilocks zone to find between those two. And I took this assignment to her, and she said, Jason, is this a power that you can turn your will and your life over to? I said, hell yes, I can, because he's a stud. This guy's a stud. She said, start here. So from that day forward, I began to view him as my homie, like someone that was intimate, that I could hang with, someone that I could go skiing with. And to this day, I try to ride up on the ski lift alone and save him a seat. And I will visualize my God hanging with me, and I'll just thank him for the creations that I'm seeing and the ability that I'm alive and I get to breathe, and like be intentional about just thinking about those things. And what's interesting is it's like those little daily habits, even waking up and making my bed and opening the blinds to let the sunlight of the Spirit into my life, changes me. it changes how I interact. It changes how I view color and how I view nature and how I view people and how I view my kids. And not that I do it perfectly. I slobber my way through all the time, and I need to be reminded. But this was a completely new way of living.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because after that experience with choosing to turn my will and my life over to this version, it was upon that foundation where I began to trust again and turn to him in prayer and actually believe that I was being heard and believe that he was available. But I still had resentments.
Mm-hmm. So it's a natural feeling.
She said, he's a big boy. He can take it. Go tell him. She said, write him out.
Mm-hmm.
So she had me write out all my resentments to God. And I was pissed about the fact that all my friends drank in high school too, but none of them became an addict. I'm homeless. Why do I have this disease? Why do I have this allergy? Like, why did you give me this?
Yeah.
Because, of course, I'm not going to take any credit. I'm going to blame. But I wrote out a bunch of stuff like, why did you have to take the love of my life out of, why did you let this happen, this and this? And I remember getting on my knees and like sharing that out loud in prayer. And I let him have it. Like all the F-bombs, everything that I felt. And I read them with feeling. And I remember just totally breaking down when I saw my son's face in my mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
And the unconditional love that I have for him. There's nothing in the world that he could do that would stop me from loving him. And all of a sudden I knew how God viewed me. That there's nothing I've done. And if my son has resentments towards me for placing him for adoption, if he hates me for that, all I would want is for him to come to me and just tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell me.
Have you guys
I'll give it. Yeah.
How is it?
We have such a cool relationship, man. Good. It is just the ideal birth father, birth son.
So do you live close to each other?
He lives in Utah, but I travel to go see his soccer tournaments and
good.
Yeah, it's a special, most meaningful relationship in my life, and I got a do-over because my twins, my son who's 8, he looks exactly like Nate, so I have like a chance to to do it. And
does he ever come up and stay or anything? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So you guys got a pretty good relationship. That's good. Good for you, man.
Yeah. As good of a relationship as you can have with someone who's 17 and it is
for sure
friends. And
yeah.
Prom and no bit.
Oh God, I just had a boy come over and ask for prom. So yeah, I'm with you right there.
You got your shotgun ready. I mean,
he's a good kid, but they're all sniffing. They're all sniffing. It's just that switch gets flipped, and man, there's no going back.
We know.
Little shits.
Yeah, I know.
My wife's like, you can't. I'm like, honey, I'll give on a lot of things. I'm not budging on boys. No way.
Exactly. Because we know. Moms don't know.
Sorry, Mom. I wish I could just sit my daughters down and be like, this is what how your dad used to be.
This is what guys think.
I mean, I do have these conversations, but that's good, man. That's incredible that you were able to work through all that. Find a place and a higher power to be able to talk and communicate to, and
that's the key.
God, you got lucky.
That's the key.
You got blessed, man. I don't even say lucky. You got blessed, like to be able to pull out of all of that. So, let's talk about your clinics real quick. And I got a couple questions I just want to ask as like a dad, and kids and things. But what? Unless there's anything, I don't want to skip over anything because this is such an incredible story. So you go through your road to recovery, which I'm sure was an absolute battle for a while. It is for anybody trying to fix anything. How many years into it until you just started deciding, like, what switch you went from being the program or in the program to providing a program? When did that come into play?
Right. Yeah. that
if there's anything we're skipping that is very important, please touch on it. But
for sure,
I want to make sure like this is. I mean,
that's a great direction to go because it definitely aligns with how I've stayed sober. Is you have to find a purpose.
Okay.
In your recovery, or it's just going to get stale, man. It's like fishing. If you fish the same fishing hole for the same type of fish, the same way, you're going to eventually get tired of it and it's going to lose its excitement.
Is that what happens in the recovery world? I don't want to use the word stagnant, but you get comfortable.
Stagnant. I mean,
and then are those the
think
ones
about it? We're addicted to like
fast-paced
rush.
Yeah.
I mean,
endorphins, you got to get a fix. So is that what happens in the recovery world? You get kind of stagnant and then you slip up and then you're right back into it or got to start all over. Is that kind of a common thing if you don't?
Yeah, I think it's like anything. If you don't keep it fresh and new and exciting, it's just going to kind of fade.
Okay.
And that's when people think, oh, I got it. Like I don't need
and then
to go to meetings
creeps
anymore.
up on
I don't need to do service anymore. And
you go camping one time and have a beer. Yeah. So in your recovery, what was the path that took you to where we're at now?
So I had another experience that when these are the nudges that happen all the time, these little like personal revelations, so to speak. But I was practicing step 11, which is sought through prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with the God of your understanding.
Okay.
And praying for the power to carry it out is step 12. And I was thinking about what to do with my life. And here I am, a 31-year-old, living in a sober living home with a bunch of guys that are just newly sober. There is a house manager, but, I've lost everything. I'm starting over. Just no money, no nothing. And that is like, what am I going to do with my life? And I remember laying there, like practicing step 11, where I kind of just say, help me to know what your will is for me. And a lot of times I don't get anything, but this one experience in particular, I felt strongly that I needed to write a book.
Really?
And I've never been interested in writing, and I've never been really good at it. Or like I started writing in rehab. That's kind of where I started writing.
Yeah.
And that was like the first nudge. And then I had, like, fast forward, I was working, my first job out of rehab was cooking hot dogs out in front of a Home Depot. And I was making $6.50 an hour, minimum wage, plus tips. And the idea was, as my therapist said, find a job that is zero stress, because this is a stress response disease.
Okay.
And so convalesce, like take time. It's like someone with cancer that comes out of chemo. You got to take it slow. You don't jump back into full-time work and run, or else you're going to...
So is cooking hot dogs outside of Home Depot a stressless job? Is it an easy job or
and humiliating? Job? It was stress-free, but it was humiliating.
Okay, why is that?
Oh, well, I saw my ex-brother-in-law roll up to pick up some stuff, and here is this freaking junky ex-brother-in-law slinging dogs behind a sweaty grill. Like,
okay.
I mean,
it's humbling.
Yeah, it was, dude.
Very humbling.
It was hard, but
you're on the right path.
I have this customer come up, and I ask him, what do you want? And he orders it. They were actually bratwursts. They were like high-end. Okay. Not just hot dogs.
Important. That's important.
They were brats. Stylish. And he said, hey. Or I said, hey, how's your day going? And he said, oh, it's good. How's yours? And one of the symptoms of people in early recovery is we tend to overshare. And so when someone asked me in those days, how am I doing? I say, I'm doing pretty good. I'm 72 days sober off crack cocaine and heroin. I'm doing all right in my treatment program. This is my 5th round, but still working through my divorce. Just like, giving him everything, right? And he's like stepping back. Dude. Wow.
Oh, pass on the hot dog.
Yeah, way too much. But in this particular situation, he said, can I ask you a question? I've got a son who's struggling with addiction right now. And we are trying everything that we know how to help them. And I don't know what else to do. What do I do? In that hour that I spent with this dad, I knew what I was going to do with my life.
Really?
I knew at that point that that I have a unique expertise. I have answers.
You've walked the
for
walk.
people who are needing answers. And I knew that that was what I was going to do. And I decided to go get a job working with adolescents as like a glorified babysitter, helping people with fetal alcohol syndrome.
Really?
Restraints, like you talk about restraints, we had to learn how to safely restrain these kids that have all sorts of conduct disorders and all sorts of mental...
That wasn't stressful?
That was beautiful.
Okay. I guess
Because
I'm older.
Now I'm in the intention of giving back.
You're helping.
I'm helping.
And
I'm like a big guy. I kind of like the wrestle sometimes.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
I like the adrenaline rush, and it was cool. Like, it was really cool. You got to connect with kids, and so I did that for a while, and then, you know, I just stayed in the field and kind of grew up in the field, and at the same time, I decided to go back to school and get my master's in communications, because I knew I needed to write this book, and I didn't know how. And so I went through the master's program at the same time I was working in the industry, and I was just learning all sorts of stuff. And when you're in graduate school, you can parlay a lot of your work projects as your assignments. And so it was really cool to like use that to help the companies I was working for. And then I think the pivot point in school was I was in a health communications class, and I had to write a paper, and I was struggling with the topic. And this adjunct professor said, you know, you talk a lot about addiction. Why don't you write something to the families, right? 5 keys to helping an addict.
And you were like,
ding. Okay, I mean, there's probably 50, but yeah,
I'll start with 5.
Start with that. Mm-hmm. And you know what? That paper grew into my field project, which is like the final thesis of graduate school.
Which grew into a book.
And that became Unhooked. And
Man,
so
good for you, man. That's incredible.
it took 10 years to write, but the 10 years were going to pass anyway, right? And there were seasons where I was living the chapters, and I wasn't writing. I was living, and I learned a lot through that process. Love coaching people on how to write their story and the hero's journey, and you know how to take it.
Yeah.
And all the while, never having an intention of opening up a center.
Okay.
There I am working for a company in Southern California. I'm actually up like in Newport, on the beach.
Yeah.
And again, another experience. I learned that 2 of my friends had overdosed recently, and it was just this guilt. And I was sitting there looking out at the ocean and the waves, and I'm dissatisfied with the job I'm working. It's like, turned to my wife, and I said, honey, I don't feel like I'm making a difference. What if we just quit our jobs and just move somewhere and opened up a rehab? Just totally joking. She said, sounds like an adventure.
That's a good wife.
What do we got to lose?
Yeah.
It's like, we don't have anything to lose. Like, we're paying $2,200 for 2-bedroom apartment.
Right, let's go.
You know, like, we're not, you know, living to work or working to live. And I want to work to live. I want to live my life. And so that's when we came up to Idaho and had an angel investor begin just the seed money. And that was almost 10 years ago. And now we have 3 locations throughout Idaho, and we've seen thousands of miracles.
Wow.
And I try to take everything that I learned that was good from all my treatment experiences and all my research and all my jobs, and leave the bad. And so the reason why Brick House has these kinds of outcomes is because of that component of trust, rapport, connection, tribe, and then we help feed their spiritual anorexia alongside of their co-occurring.
I mean, these are great numbers too, very high. So you got to pride yourself on. So what are you doing different or more structured? I mean, to be able to put out such an incredible clinic, to be able to help people, what sets you up? Because I feel, I mean, what was that show back in the day, those rehab shows where they'd bring the celebrities in, and it was just a shit show watching them.
Intervention, maybe.
Was it Intervention? But I do have a question. I want to, the sober living houses. I mean, I feel like those are just, some of them are just absolute nightmares. They're just money grabs in a way. I'm not saying you guys, but like you see these people and they all go to these clinics and they all come back out and none of them.
Isn't it like celebrity rehab or something?
Yeah, celebrity rehab maybe. But it's, so you start this clinic and I mean, you've got to be learning so much at the same time. I mean, now you're embedded in the world. You went from utilizing these programs to now providing these programs, and there's so much I'm sure you're just learning every day. I mean, you're probably still learning almost 10 years in. I'm sure you come across something new all the time.
Yeah. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, you know, that's a learning curve in and of itself, is just building the systems and building the mechanisms so that you're not growing a Frankenstein that you're going to be a slave to.
Yep.
You know, I don't want to build something that I'm just going to be, is going to like
hold you
captive. Yeah. And the idea from the start was like, okay, how do I build this through its infancy into adolescence and maturity where I become irrelevant? Meaning, if I check out or get hit by a bus, it can still help people.
You're still helping. Got it.
And that process has been ongoing. Going through it still. It's like, okay, how do I rinse and repeat this and help more people? And, you know, we're bootstrapped, so we don't have outside influence with the funding. We do it all, my wife and I, as far as the bank. And, you know, that's worked so far. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But we're doing
good for you guys, man.
It's cool, man.
Good for you. I'm pretty sure it's awesome having a wife that's big support and rock for you as well. I think that's a huge battle that most, and I'm just going to speak on the men's side of things, that men we face, is not having that ride or die, that rock, the foundation of a good wife that'll push us and, you know, be there to just go along for the journey. I feel like a lot of guys lose their drive, their dreams, their hopes because they're just crushed because they want that 9-to-5 job and a guaranteed paycheck. It's scary, you know. I'm fortunate. My wife, she always got me out of my comfort zone and forced me to do things that all over my mouth. She's like, we're doing it then. And I'm like, oh, shit, now I got to do it. So that's incredible.
Keeps it exciting.
It really does.
Keeps it going.
It does. You know, we started several new adventures this year, and it's been wild. So, you know, we just hit 10 years on one of our companies in January, and
congratulations.
You know, it's been fun, but it's a grind though. It's a grind.
Yep.
That's why I love when people are like, I want to work for myself. That way I can just do whatever. I'm like,
risk reward, man. But you got to know the risks.
Yeah. So some questions as a dad. Let's say you have a loved one and they're battling, or dad, a father, a mother, a husband, it doesn't matter. You have a loved one that is battling a substance abuse. What's the first step? How do you reach out? How do you provide the help? Like, what is the best situation? Obviously, every situation is different, but you find out someone's battling a substance. Where do you start? Do you reach out to a clinic? Do you reach out to them directly and trying to have an intervention? Are interventions even worth anything if they're not in the right mindset or stage in their life to be able to accept being berated by all of their loved ones? What as a loved one, what do we do in these situations? What's the best step as a parent, loved one, whatever? Where do we go? How do you start?
Yeah, the questions start with the strategy first, the principles that work, and then the tactics that apply the principles. I think a lot of times we'll jump in and practice like we'll want answers to this particular situation. We'll try it. It doesn't work. And then we get frustrated. And so the overarching strategy is how do I build a relationship where I can be of influence to this person? Now, that in and of itself is a work.
Oh, for sure.
That's an intent.
It
That's
doesn't
a
come
mindset.
overnight. Yeah.
And because here's the thing, like, you can try to break the horse. Think of trying to train a wild Mustang. Mm-hmm. You could try to break the horse with tying them down and until they finally submit. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is that there will be a day where that horse is going to break out and
push back,
rebel. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to people that have this, this struggle, the first step would be to, okay, every interaction that I have, I want it to be well-intended from a space of empathy and compassion and understanding.
Okay.
Why? Because I can say the same thing in a tactic to my loved one to try to get them help. But if there's not a trust and rapport between us, whatever you say to me is just going to go through one ear and out the other, because I may or may not be ready to do what you want me to do. And so it's more of this exploration of their ambivalence. So if someone's going to be honest, they'll say, look, this is really working for me. I really love this behavior. Like, this helps me with my anxiety. This helps me feel socially accepted. This helps me escape. And it helps my mindset. But it also is making me forget things. It's making me feel lazy. When I'm not on it, I feel depressed, like depleted. Mm-hmm. My sleep is being affected. Like, if they were to honestly look at the costs and the benefits of both in front of you and let them explain the reasons why they do and don't want to change, that allows them to come up with their own reasons to change, their own volition.
Okay.
But the second I start to impose my ideas on you,
there's a wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's a therapeutic approach. It's called motivational interviewing. And that motivational interviewing is this process of coming in as more of a partner, honoring their individuality and not being the authority. The second they view you as an authority is going to change the dynamic of influence. With an adolescent, it's very different. So I'm going to speak mainly to adults.
Do you mainly focus on adults?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the approach, like rolling with resistance, for example. Like, if someone is going to push back, mm-hmm. instead of locking horns and getting in a wrestle, it's more of a dance.
Got it.
It's more of a validating where they're at, even if what they say is totally off the wall. It's just giving them a space to kind of resolve that ambivalence within themselves and trust the process that, even though it may not happen right now, if they're willing to explore it, then you allow the natural consequences of their actions to help them work through it.
Okay.
And I think that's the hardest part, is being patient enough to allow natural consequences. And sometimes you have to inflict those natural consequences, like if it's a boundary of curfew, mm-hmm. or if it's a boundary of, like, you can't use and come home and stay here. And if that's broken, well, you got to move out.
How bad does enabling... I know enabling's horrible, but, like, that situation, if you set boundaries and you allow them to break those boundaries, how much are you hurting that individual by doing that? Instead of sticking to the guns, because you were saying earlier, you try to deflect
So obviously that person, whoever's using, will say, "Hey, you're not allowed in my home while you're doing this," and then they pull this, it's your fault, whatever it is, right? And then you allow them back in. How much are you setting them back every time that you enable and give them what they need? Is that a serious thing? I mean, every time that you budge, it's just hurting them even more. I mean, is there certain times that you should give them, or is there not, or you just have to stand your ground?
Yeah, I think if I could use the analogy of a speeding ticket.
Okay.
And a $10 speeding ticket may not slow me down.
Yeah.
Especially if I keep getting to just $10 speeding tickets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it starts to get up in the hundreds, I might slow down. And so it's this proving of the opposites of like the justice and the mercy and the grace. Like the love and the law, and finding that Goldilocks zone. One of my spiritual mentors talks about this Goldilocks zone of like balancing being firm with the guardrails, but giving them, think of it as like a bowling alley.
Yeah, with the bumpers.
With the bumpers.
Okay.
And you got the guardrails that are like, these are not, like outside of this,
Not happening.
not okay.
Okay.
But give them room to grow. And that's, I think, sometimes the hardest, because
Finding those boundaries, or finding where to set your bumpers, is that what you refer to as it can be hard? Okay.
yeah, and holding them and making sure that,
Do you provide that help to the families?
yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
So if anybody that's listening needs any help or could talk, how can they get a hold of you? Are you open for any of that? If people have loved ones that they need that are battling addiction and things and mental health, because I feel mental health is the worst it's ever been in this country now, especially with social media, our political environment. It's just, everything is just built to breed hate and stress and anxiety, and it catches up on me. Like, I catch myself watching videos over tearing down and I just builds that anger and hate, and it just affects all of us. So like, if people need to reach out, what's the best way for them to be able to ask for advice or send a loved one to a treatment? How do we get a hold of you? We'll link everything, but I want you to be able to.
Yeah, the link of the resources. I always ask a family member, say, first read Unhooked before we talk, because that's going to give the basis of anything that I would have to offer. Like, there's got to be a foundational understanding,
Okay,
so that when I ask questions, it's in the context of like, okay, I've done my, I want them to do, I want the listener to do the homework of understanding the basic foundation upon which any advice. And then I do have a weekly coaching call that we can drop the link in, and it's free, so anyone can jump on there and join and ask questions. And I try to do that kind of in a group setting, and just to for time, a very limited time available. So that's what I would recommend, is listen to it on Audible or snag it on Amazon. It's Unhooked.
and I feel like that's a pretty easy ask, especially if you have somebody that is battling an addiction, to just get the basics first and read that. If you truly want to help somebody, that's not a hard ask.
That's right. And to go
It
back
kind of
to
lines you out too and educates you on what they're probably going through, what they're gonna be going through, the stages of recovery. I mean, I'm sure you got. I didn't. This all happened so quick. I didn't get a chance to go through the book, but I'm sure you've covered your whole life in there, so people will be able to. Oh, okay, maybe raise some awareness to what their son's going through, what their father's going through, or whoever. So
yeah, I try to couch the principles that will help an addicted loved one or the family members, so that it's connected to a vignette of my life.
Okay.
And so that it tells the story in context of like, okay, this is the stage I was in here.
yeah,
And this is what my parents did that worked. And this is what they did that didn't work.
perfect.
And then this is the vignette of the stage where I'm in contemplation. And this is what my parents did that worked. And this is what didn't work.
Got it.
And this is how you can help in this stage. And kind of walk you through the process of being able to identify where you're at, and then knowing what tactics to use.
Because every stage is a different tactic.
That's right.
Man, this is such a...
It's important.
Yeah. And if they don't have it, they can just be screwing everything up and creating more damage.
Yeah. I mean, we all do the best that we can, but sometimes we try to force an outcome that someone is not
Ready for.
And then would they get the opposite result?
Oh, it probably spirals them even more in the wrong direction.
Yeah. At the very least, distance the relationship of influence. And then you lose influence.
And once that's gone, it's probably pretty hard to get back.
Oh, yeah. Once they're 18, I mean, how are you going to influence them?
Yeah.
You can't. So it's all about influence. It's all about building that.
Trust.
Yep.
Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm sure we could talk about this for hours, but
Let's do
another one. We'll do it. I would love to have you back on. I'd love to. I want to go through your book, and then maybe that'll open up a lot more questions.
So many.
Is there anything that you would like to share before we wrap this up, that you would like to put out there, and before we do another one?
You know, I've been working on really trying to help individuals recognize that even though we're in a mental health savvy and kind of a promoted need right now, like everybody's got to focus on helping those that struggle with mental health, and flipping that to mental wealth and having individuals looking at the superpower within their diagnosis. Like my anxiety drove me to habits that ultimately I completed an Ironman.
Good for you.
And it's really like recognizing like these habits that I do every day to keep my anxiety at bay, like ice baths, for example. It's huge for my anxiety. Huge. But what I've also found is it's unlocked some other areas of strength and other benefits. And like all these things that I've tried to implement in my life, these habits have opened up a whole world for me. And that's the superpower, I think. Like I'm driven because of my anxiety.
So you've learned how to take something that has a negative stigma on it, figure out how and why it works, and then be able to use that for a positive.
Yeah. And try to take that message to corporations, because if, employees are struggling with this,
for sure,
and it does impact productivity. It does impact the bottom line, and that's important to business owners.
So you're doing clinics and seminars on these?
Yeah, so I do corporate consulting.
How do we find you on that? If somebody wants you to come and look you up, I mean, I'll just on everything else.
I'll just drop the email address in there and
cool
in the show notes, and you guys can connect that way. But yeah, I work with these folks here and do retreats, and I mean it's fun.
Cool, man.
Yeah,
that's great. I'm glad we got to sit down and talk. I mean, this was an eye opener in so many different ways, because it's, you look at these people that struggle, and especially I feel horrible that we have a homeless situation that we do in this country, especially the veteran side of things, and that there's children out on the streets. I just watched a whole entire documentary on this kid that was trying to help these kids get off the street, and they, no matter all the help he got him, they would not, they just...
Is that the one down at Venice Beach?
Yes. He brought them into his home, even though it was against everything that he... It was so sad. It was one of the saddest things. And these kids would just go right back to the streets because it's all they knew, or their friends were there, and one of them's pregnant.
Yep.
And so it's we want to like step over that homeless guy. Oh, get your life together. And we have no idea what the mental battles that these people are just going through every single day. And that's why it's so hard and that's where we really try to teach our kids on, especially in that demographic of people. It's like, hey, that it might not look rock bottom to them now, but it is a horrible situation. So any chance we can get to help them, we help them. But it's never with food or never with money. I never give money. It's always, can we help you in any way? Can we get you any supplies? Because I don't want to ever be that person that helped enable and give somebody money and maybe they overdose on it. I think that would be absolutely the worst thing ever. But it's just so sad that the mental health of this country and how many people are on the streets, and we do nothing for it. And it's a pretty terrible time, especially how much money we're sending everywhere else in the world. So
Bam, may I publicly edify you in a very real and sincere way? The fact that you're bringing this topic to the world and to your audience, is helping. The end influencer is the family.
Yeah.
That's ultimately where the change happens. It's in the home.
And I feel like nowadays, man, it's just so sad. It's so easy to get divorced. It's so easy to just walk away. And these parents have no idea what they're doing to their children, what they're doing. And then they use them as pawns. And then they wonder why their daughters are chasing the wrong thing or their sons are going down different paths. And it's just, God, I wish we could just pause and have everybody take a breath and just focus on what is important in their family. And I feel that, especially now with like social and everything, and you have all these influencers and all these guys that are, you got to grind and you got to work all these hours and you got to make all this money. They never talk about their fucking families. They never talk about them. They never highlight them. They never talk about being a father. Never talk about being, it's all about the hustle and the grind, and they're losing track of everything that is important to them. Everything. That's just my opinion. It's just, I tell people, man, like, we have so much going on in our life, but at the end of the day, we have so much going on because we're able to spend so much time with our kids. And if I don't need to be rich, and I tell people, we don't have a lot of it. We get by, right? We have just enough that we're free, and I get to spend all the time in the world with my kids. And I know everything that's going on in their life. They're able to talk to me about boys, the goods, the bads, what their problems, and I feel that these parents are just so fixated on trying to make money, trying to have enough to buy the toys and the boats and the ATVs and have that giant house. Meanwhile, their kids are slamming pills and chasing the wrong things. And it's like, for what? For an image to impress the neighbor? Like, who's going to be there at the end of the day?
That's right.
Yeah,
you got it.
So
I love your platform, man, and
no, we're just starting, man. Hopefully we can get a lot more guys like you on to be able to share some experiences and just open people's eyes. I mean, it's so easy, I feel like, to judge some drug addict on the corner. And that guy, I mean, the guy could just be anxiety. They let him there.
That's right.
And nobody ever stopped to just help, talk to him, or give him a resource to be able to cope with it. Instead, they end up on the streets, and once you're there, I feel like that's just a vacuum there, and there's no coming out of it. There's very few people that you hear about having success stories like you that come off the streets and get back in contact and be a father and now a husband and have more kids. And good for you, man. It's not every day.
Bam, you would be surprised how many stories there are like mine.
Oh, I hope there's so many.
There are.
Yeah, good.
And I'm gonna introduce you to them. I want you to come and see.
I'd love to.
Some of the miracle show and get a front row seat.
I would love to. I'd love to bring my kids. I'd love to bring my family to that.
It's something else, man.
Yeah.
And that's the good news, is that the recovery movement is spreading far and wide.
Good.
And celebrities are making it okay to talk about this stuff. And
what I feel with more platforms these days, it's not being mainstreamed in a way, but it is, where there's so much help. You know, you look at Vietnam era vets and nothing. Nowadays, I mean, there's 100,000 charities for just veterans alone, you know, so we are growing. There is a lot of positive, because I feel like things are being brought to light in these situations, and people now have platforms that have recovered and are able to talk about it and talk about their road to recovery and their hurdles and the relapses and everything that they've gone through, which doesn't normalize it, but it puts it out there for somebody who's like, I just went through that. Okay, they did it too. It's not the end, you know. It's just a little hurdle. It's a speed bump, and we can get through it. So
yeah,
it's guys like you talking about it, man. This is pretty incredible.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great.